right. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to start us off by saying that this meeting is being recorded by the Open Space Task Force of SGIC. And if any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify me at this time. All right. So calling us to order, welcome everybody. We have a new way that we're going to be starting off by inviting some of our public members to participate in the entire meeting. So we're going to invite Pat to participate in the meeting from the beginning. And we'll go around and do roll call. And let's start up on the screen there. Mary, do you want to start us off?
Yep, this is Mary Chicklin. I'm chair of the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee and a public member.
Great. And Emily?
Emily Boss, member of the task force and also a member of the Conservation Commission in Greenfield.
And joining us from vacation. Thank you for joining. And we have Elizabeth on the screen as well, who's joining us from the Ag Commission. Welcome.
Yes, I just unmuted myself. Yeah, I'm just coming from the Agricultural Commission, prompted mostly by a resident that came to our meeting last week and offered some very interesting ideas about.
Great.
Yeah, so that's.
Great, yeah. So, thanks for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Francoise Abt, and I'm on the Open Space Committee and also the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee.
Pat Sorrentino, and I'm interested in being on the Open Space Task Force. So I've been coming to meetings and I'm at the meeting tonight.
Yeah, at this point, I think we say that you're a public non-voting member.
A public non-voting.
Is I think how we're saying it. Yeah. Great. And I'm Jonah Keene. I am on the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee and I chair the Open Space Task Force. All right, so let's see here. Let's jump in to our first order of business, which is approving minutes. Do we have a motion to approve our minutes from September?
I make the motion. I second.
All right. Any discussion? I have one very small edit at the end where it just says Emily moved to adjourn and Emily seconded. I assume somebody else did one of those, but that's it.
I can fix that.
Okay. Otherwise, looks good to me. Any other discussion? All right. All in favor of approving our September minutes?
Aye.
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 All right. Approved. Thank you, Mary, for taking great minutes. Okay, so the task force membership is our next item. So I sent in an email, and just to say it here in the meeting, Mary and I chatted a bit, and then I looked a little more into the open meeting laws to understand what's possible with membership. And there are no strict rules about public members having to, or the public participating at certain times. So we just thought, well, we can invite them to participate at the beginning and join in the conversation as we go through the different items. And it'll be that simple. I think my understanding from reading it is that we can invite specific people, so that we would invite our specific non-voting members, which are currently Matt, Lee, and Kent, who have expressed interest. Lee sent an email saying, unfortunately, something came up and she's not able to make it today, but that's the current thought. So I think at this point, we're welcome to encourage others to participate in that same way. So if we have other people in mind, people that care about open space in Greenfield, or that have some type of expertise that could be helpful for us, especially as we start to dig in a little bit more in the work and say, oh, it'd be really nice if we had somebody that had a background in this or connections with a certain thing. We could explore inviting new people. So any other thoughts on that? I don't know if we want to, we had talked doing some more aggressive, or maybe aggressive is not the right word, but more active recruitment. Other thoughts on that? And like, are there others that people know personally that we want to try to invite? Or if we want to put another call out more publicly to build this team a bit?
I have a question. So did you confirm that except for the four of us, the other members are definitely non-voting?
Yes, this is technically a subcommittee or a task force of SGIC, and they would have to be members. I think the way that we're doing it with Emily as representative of the Conservation Commission, we think is legitimate, is our understanding. But any other members would need to be, official voting members would have to be mayorally appointed, and there's no place to appoint them to, since this is not a standalone committee. It is something, that we can continue to talk about if we want to advocate for the creation of a standalone open space committee. It's in the master plan. And this was our workaround to create this task force, because we haven't had enough support from the mayors to create the standalone. So that's something that we can advocate for. And particularly, I think if we grow the team, I think the biggest argument against it has been the lack of volunteers, so if we built the team to be significant, maybe we would have a stronger case in advocating for it to be standalone. But at the moment, that's the situation.
And the reason I'm asking is I'm just wondering if we can interest people to come in, they can comment, but they can't vote on anything. Right? I mean, I don't know how attractive that is.
Well, I don't see voting as so far, most of our voting is on
Minutes.
and adjourning.
Yeah.
So I don't think we have a lot of maybe more will come up as we come along, and we'll have to discuss that and evaluate that. So, yeah.
Well, just a question, because I can't vote. So I assume I can bring up problems with the minutes, but then I can't second or vote, because that just makes it kind of strange, because I've been on committees before where you're automatically, voting, and
Right.
so
It is strange.
So that's why I didn't say anything when you were talking about the minutes. I just didn't say a word, but
Right. Yeah. So I think at that point, you just wouldn't vote, but
Yeah.
that if you had input, we
Go
would
ahead.
welcome input at any
Just don't vote.
stage.
Okay.
That's my understanding of how we're going to do it. And I think until we're told otherwise, it seems like it should work. Yeah.
right, I got you.
Yeah.
Can I just interject? I think what we discussed last time too is to try to move forward with, starting to think about what we're going to work on. And then it may become more apparent that we need to either change our structure, or we may need to seek guidance if it does turn out that we are putting forward projects that really need some sort of official endorsement or something that we don't necessarily have the capacity to do. But I'd hate to see us spend the next several meetings still talking about membership and,
Right.
instead of just moving forward and then seeing what percolates, we really need whatever kind of person that is.
Yep. Great. That sounds good to me. Good. Okay. So we'll move on from that discussion. Unless anybody else, any other questions or input? All right. So the next agenda items here are honing in on our goals a little more. We had, at the last meeting, we had talked about some follow-up discussions that some of us were gonna have to better understand the goals that we were picking, to see how they fit in with what the cities and others are working on. So Mary and I met with Eric, the city planner. After that, I met with Christy, the rec department director. Were there any other conversations that happened? Emily, did you have a chance to talk about it all with the Conservation Commission?
I have shared the link with the priorities ranked with the Conservation Commission, but due to the length of our meeting, we didn't have a chance at the most recent. And so I've basically just asked them to put it on our agenda for the next time that we have some, substantial time. and I've asked them all to look it over, so I hope to bring that,
Okay.
that back soon.
Great, okay. Well, I think I think we can report back on the two conversations. And Mary, you said in your email, you have something to report back from FERCog, not a conversation, but just based on your exploration
No,
of.
Not really. I didn't, just only to say that I didn't find any relevant planning documents
Oh,
at
yeah.
first, review, but I have not connected because I've just been away and not.
Yep.
But I can do that this coming month.
Yeah, great. Okay, so the one thing I'll note before we summarize the meetings that we had is I was poking around at some Conservation Commission files that Travis had shared, because Travis had done a ton of organizing around conservation lands in town. And there was a map in there, and I sent him a question about it. I haven't heard back yet. I don't know if you know, Emily. There was a map in the files that he sent me that's a priority parcels map. That looks to me to be parcels that are prioritized for conservation in Greenfield.
I'm sure this will come up. It doesn't ring a bell off the top of my head. What Travis has shared with us recently that has been great has been updated trails maps. That was part of some of the work that he did, which hopefully I think will be helpful in our sort of organizing. And he
Okay.
did a lot of deed research, which was really
Right.
interesting, about finding out which parcels were acquired with conservation purposes in the deed or the document. So that's helpful too, to know what's the level of protection for the properties that are owned by the Conservation Commission or in their care. So
Right.
I think there will be a lot of material that will be helpful for our process to look over it sometime. And if there's a priority parcels layer or map that he's made, then that of course would be very helpful.
Yeah, it says draft on it, and it's just a PDF, so I don't know the story on it, but it's something that some work's been done thinking about it. Great. So let's see. Should we, Mary, you want to help report back on our conversation with Eric?
It would be helpful to just bring up that document that I made the notes in, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to recollect anything.
Do you want to share it, or do you want me to share?
Go ahead and share it. It's just your document that I added a column to. Goals document.
Viewing locally. Viewing locally. I want to do more than view locally. All right, you're seeing that? Mary?
Yes.
That was a yes. Great. So I guess the big picture, our conversation with Eric and Christy, both conversations, where I would say they are dedicated public servants who are tired and overworked. There was a little bit of feeling resigned to the fact that we haven't made a lot of progress and don't have a lot of options for making progress, but supportive of this first goal of that we have put together here in generally supportive. So, Eric thought the idea of a map that put together priority parcels of open space to protect in the city was a great idea, and he was fully supportive of that. He said that does not exist to his knowledge and would welcome it as a tool. That's the big picture. Mary, do you want to give any other details from your notes there?
See, I can't take notes and also see I'm just working on a small laptop, so
I'm sorry. Okay.
technologically challenged right at the moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's fine. Let me do it. And I'll summarize and you chime in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So let's see, we talked about grants that were available, and he did agree with the basic concept of CPA funds combined with the state land acquisition grants as being a good model for us to use for protecting land. He basically was supportive of this first goal. He said the MVP funding, is definitely another option, but the city is not actively working on the next round of MVP. So there's a thing called MVP 2.0 that the city is not actively working on. It's going to be another year or two, I guess, before we are up to speed, and we'll be applying for action grants through that state funding source. That would be for protecting open space that has a direct impact on stormwater control, something, directly related to climate change impacts and mitigating those impacts. So
to that, which is just that part of the MVP, which is municipal vulnerability preparedness plan. It's a relatively, if you haven't seen it before, it's a relatively small, modest plan, remarkably enough for it being a state plan. I think there's around 6 or so prioritized areas. And so when the community goes to make an application for funding, they have to hit on one or more of those priority areas. They can't just make up a new, well, my understanding is they can't make up a new priority. They have to concentrate on one of those. And I did a brief look before I went away at the state's website on MVP, and it looks as though at some point all the communities will have to do another round of planning, so that MVP plan is probably several years old now. So that's what the 2.0 is Jonah is referring to. But in the meantime, there's no reason our community can't apply for funds under our existing plan. There's nothing that says we cannot. So that's kind of where that stands right now. But I do think that MVP is a good place to make sure that we're participating when the next round comes up, because that's a way for us to make sure that our priorities for conservation or whatever it is we come up with in the next year or so are reflected in the new plan.
right, yeah. And though we are eligible to apply currently, it seemed unlikely due to a lack of capacity in the city, was what he had said. Is that right, Mary?
That was his statement, yes.
Right. So we could currently apply under our current plan for MVP funding, but he said there's just not the capacity at the moment to manage that process. And so.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Sure.
It's Patty. When do you know the due date for applying for? Well, I guess I wanted to catch up on, like, if people were able to add capacity to apply for the MVP existing funds.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know more about that, because I do think there are people who might be able to kind of collaborate on that. And then
Yeah, and two things. First, can you just introduce yourself, Patty?
Yes. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I'm not really sure how great my image is, but my name is Patty O'Neill, and I am a Greenfield resident and an ecological landscaper, and also a Conway School alum. And I'm particularly interested in land use and like kind of big picture land management and ecological ways. So I've just been trying to catch up with everything that's going on and see how I can maybe be helpful. I know a lot of people who are just really interested in doing these things in Greenfield.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think if you're interested, I think we should talk more about your involvement in this team, which we just spoke once a couple weeks ago, but if you're interested in joining and being a part of this team, we should talk more. I would just, looks like Emily you have your hand up. One quick thing I was going to say is just to clarify that Eric was saying it wasn't just the applying for the MVP funding that was the capacity issue. It was more, I think it was more the managing of the project once the funding was received. That was my recollection, but I'm not positive. Emily?
If it's the MVP action grant, I just put a link to that in the chat. If it's that one, the deadline for application is November 1st, which is a very tight turnaround from right now. And then also I was going to say that many times, and I'm not sure how it works in Greenfield, but a lot of the smaller towns, when they do get an MVP grant, they often work with one of the COGs because administration of it is usually a little bit more than the staff or the volunteers can handle. So that again would require figuring out what entity was going to be the lead on it with the town, or rather not the lead, the town or the municipality is typically the lead, but then there's enough of a bureaucratic drain that oftentimes they partner with some other entity to do that paperwork. So I could imagine that would be some of the things that were coming up with Eric, and then also accomplishing it. So I'm so happy to hear that you're interested, Patricia, and it's great to know that other people would be interested. But this is setting up one of these grants isn't something that, should be done in a short period of time. It really should be thought very carefully about what action is chosen, like Mary was talking about, which it hits with a plan, and then what parts of the city would be involved or what other organizations would be doing it. Those are all things that are excellent, wonderful, and I'm really glad to hear that these are focused on conservation as well. I work with Frank Land Trust, and that's also a high priority for me. But this particular timing, I can see it being very difficult.
Yeah. And I think for us, the reason that we're talking about MVP specifically in this conversation is around open space specifically. And so for us, I think we have a few steps to go with looking at where we want to even focus protecting new open space before we would be applying for any funds. But this is MVP funds are funds that I think we should keep on the table of the conversation as we're talking about moving projects forward. Great. So the other thing from Eric. We have this second tier 1 priority goal that we had debated quite a bit in our last couple of meetings. If we wanted to keep this role for us as an advocate and assisting with communication within the city, I would say Eric was not supportive of that one. He didn't say don't do it, but he said that there's a ton of communication between departments in Greenfield, and more so than other places that he's worked. And he feels like things are humming along nicely in the communication front. I think there are parts of this that are different from that. So things that we lumped in here that are very specific. But my personal thought, particularly after talking with him, is that, as I think we had discussed, we move this number 2 down to the tier 2 priority, and we don't make this a top priority of what we're working on, is my thought based on that conversation. We don't need to dig into that just yet. That's the next agenda topic. But just based on the conversation with him, that was my takeaway. Mary, anything else to add on the conversation with Eric?
No, I don't think so.
So the other thing, just do this for a second. The other conversation I had was with Christy from the rec department. She was also not aware of a prioritized parcel map for open space, and she welcomed that. She did say that there were concerns that the model of using CPA funds with the land acquisition grant, she said is totally possible, that she has some concerns. There's some steps that we need to make sure we're considering. Maybe it's a better way, not concerns. And that includes the fact that the city would need to front, we have to get the city to approve funding for the project, and then they would be reimbursed. And so it can be, even though the city ultimately would not end up paying money potentially to acquire land through that model, it would still involve the city fronting some money, which could be a challenge. That's what she mentioned.
I mean, the CPA grants are not that large.
So that particular model that I'm referring to, that's a land acquisition grant combined with CPA.
Oh, combined, okay.
So the land acquisition grant has, it can be, that for us in Greenfield, it could cover 70% of a land acquisition expense, up to $500,000, I think is the number. So we would just need to, fill the 30% of whatever the acquisition cost was, and then CPA could potentially be at least a piece of that, if not all. That's the model that we've talked about, that because money is the biggest thing that both Eric and Christy emphasized, is the lack thereof, and that they think it's great for us to be thinking about acquisition of new open space, but that the city does not have money to be going towards the acquisition of new open space. Yeah, Emily.
That's really good to know. One of the roles that the land trusts, at least ours, has often done is to work with landowners or communities to provide bridging funds. There are large scale organizations like the Conservation Fund that specialize in this kind of funding, where they provide lump sums that can be used to acquire land, and given certain assurances and securities, but then on a schedule, when the grant funds are reimbursed, they can be brought back in. So that I would definitely encourage us and the other folks at the city to consider bringing in partners for that type of thing, especially because obviously nobody's sitting around with lots of money in their pocket, but there are entities that are meant for that, and so hopefully that could facilitate those processes.
And I think that's exactly where the role that we can play. We're sort of trying to figure out how we fit in, what we can do to help. And especially after talking to Eric and Christy, who just seem a little overwhelmed and just they have enough to do, that if we can help with bringing together partners and just say, okay, here's a priority project, and we get other input on, the people agree this is a parcel that could be protected, it's up for sale perhaps, then we can say, we can bring in Franklin or others and just talk about what a funding model might look like. So I see that as a role that we can play to help move something forward that would not otherwise be moving forward in the city. So hopefully. The other thing I would say from my conversation with Christy, I did ask her about the trails maintenance, which we have in our tier 2 priorities. She said the challenge for her has been a lot of trail maintenance projects require permitting, depending on where they are located. But if they're located near wetlands, they require permitting, or in the case of the Rocky Mountain trails, there's priority habitat through there, so requires natural heritage state review. So those steps have slowed things down for her, and it's been part of the problem. We have rogue trail maintenance teams in Greenfield, which is awesome. Unfortunately, they are not following the law with permitting, but they are getting some great work done out there. But that's what's holding back from Christie's side and trying to do things the way you're supposed to do them and get the permitting that's needed. That's been a hindrance. So, something else that I I don't know if if there's a role there for us. It sounded partially like it was a capacity issue for her. And that perhaps we could assist with some of that, helping to move some of the permitting forward on projects. But I'm not sure if that's a role that makes sense for us, but,
Well, there are several of us interested in that and probably willing to do a little legwork to
Yeah.
find out, okay, where are permits required
yeah,
at the very beginning?
yeah,
And then, maybe maintenance can be started on those that don't need permitting. We probably
Right.
don't need a permit everywhere there's a trail.
right. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah,
So I made a note and
yeah, great.
see where we can find that out.
Yeah, because I know you and Lee has also expressed a lot of interest in the trail side of things, so,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, great.
Also, I was just gonna say that, as far as permitting goes, I know that both, Nancy Hazard was working up at Rocky Mountain and, taking out invasive plants, removing them. And, she was working with Heritage, and I think, working with Heritage, like getting lots of input from them with where she could remove plants because of the same issues with, priority habitat. So I think if you tell them what you're doing and work with them, they're usually, I think, pretty good about making sure you don't, if you're doing trail maintenance, that you're not going to be harming any of the, like the rare plants or species that are in the area. So
Yeah,
they seem to be willing to work with people on that kind of thing, because it's not like you're out there trying to, fill a wetland or,
right.
something like that. So.
Right, totally. Yeah, yeah, thanks. Okay, so those are the summaries of the couple conversations that we've had, which to me have been supportive of this basic idea of us thinking about prioritizing parcels to protect and trying to help move those projects forward. So I think as far as our primary goal that we've talked about, I feel like that's still good. And we'll see what Conservation Commission's thoughts are on that and what FERCog's thoughts are on that once we have those conversations. So the next item on our agenda is just you thinking about that feedback and how it affects our goals. So as I said, I do think that second top priority goal that we laid out, I'm inclined to move it to a second tier and have us have one primary focused goal, or maybe move trails up to be a first priority, since we have a couple of folks that are really interested in trails. That's my inclination to rearrange that a little bit, and then we can move forward with our priorities. But let's see what we'll say.
When you brought it up, I think it was C5,
Bring it up again.
yeah, C5, just, it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with getting the departments to talk to each other. The impervious surface, go down a little bit, C5, go down one more.
Five.
Good, yeah, it's like on row 16, yeah, or
Oh, row-
17, yeah.
Oh, so these C, not that C. Oh, I
Oh,
got
yeah,
you.
sorry.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Yeah, prepare for increasingly heavy rain.
Yeah.
And I would kind of like to leave it in the top priority. Doesn't seem to have, to be what he had an issue with.
Yeah, that's true. This falls into the advocating. So this is something that we're not going to do this analysis, right? This team is not going to do this analysis ourselves. I think it would be something that would involve a contractor, I
Right,
assume.
but that's another thing where grant, is that a problem? Trying to hire somebody, finding a grant to hire somebody to do that.
Yeah.
Is that a problem because of management again?
Yeah, that's a good thought. So maybe we keep that and try to help think of funding sources
Yeah.
for that and help support moving that along. I think we definitely need to talk with DPW, which one conversation we haven't had yet, to understand where they are with that one. I do agree, it's very important. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
I was just gonna say, C3 is almost the same as C5. It says, well, it kind of says, consider ecological resilience and climate. And then below that, as you're preparing for heavy rain events, that's part of that.
Oh, yeah, so this column D is the objectives.
Okay.
Under the, but these are the action items, is the way that this is just the way the OSRP was
Oh,
laid out.
okay.
So these are very similar objectives within this, goal. And then these are the two
Just
different-
wanted to mention, again, I can't really see the spreadsheet, but the one about mapping for flooding, et cetera, it's the one right above the tier 2 ones, right?
Yeah, so, yep, that's where that,
Some mention that Eric made of some mapping that FERCog did, but I looked at that report and there's nothing of any sort of detail that we would need to even, it's not even a starting point for what this action item calls for. So I did look into that. And it was not
Yeah.
that we're talking.
yep. Emily, were you about to say something?
Just what you had said about the being two different actions. But also I realized that B3, the ADA accessibility improvements might be something that fits well with the trail improvements. So that might be something that could be grouped. As well.
Okay, yeah, so we could rearrange it a little bit. And what are folks' thoughts on moving trail? So we could move it up so that this goal 1 for us stays the same. And then we would also have trying to coordinate and move forward an analysis of impervious surfaces. And then we would also have a trail component that's maintenance and ADA accessibility. So those would be the 3 top tier.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary, Emily, anything, does that sound like a way forward to you two?
Yeah, I think that matches the interest that we're seeing among people. And if we are getting feedback that at present the communication lines are perceived as sufficient, I think that through our interactions, we'll get a sense of if there's any lacks. But I think putting our energy into the trails and improvements and conservation seems very like a good way to go.
Great. Okay. So,
Yeah, add something.
but yeah, go ahead, Patty.
For the resilience and climate, I know there's a lot of focus on stormwater, and I have been trying to find out more about possibilities for like cultivating food, particularly like native crops, silvopasture, and that sort of thing. I don't know if you know Jono Niger at Regenerative Design Group.
Yeah.
But he knows a lot about it. I'm planning on meeting with him and seeing if he thinks this could be possible for Greenfield to do a little bit more. And maybe that could be like a combination of like the where the plantings could be, where the stormwater is going into the rivers, like perhaps the buffer can be an edible buffer, and maybe it can be managed by ideally maybe grazing. I think I was listening in on the agricultural committee recently, and they're really wanting to make that easier for folks to do, and think that everybody should have two milking goats be allowed to have that. So I think they're excited about the possibility too. But
Yeah,
just
great.
wanted to, and I'm gonna try to meet up with Jono and find out about that.
Great.
They're also really talented GIS mapper working for them. So maybe they could be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks, Patty. Okay, so I will update that spreadsheet and send it out with our reorganized goals. And at this point, I think maybe just at our next meeting, we'll have a short amount of time just to look at them the way they're reorganized, and everyone says yay, and we'll be done with talking about them and just focused on doing them. So the next agenda item is to think about how we want to do them. So to plan the next steps of moving our priorities forward. And so I added your specific potential projects, Mary, in as the second part of this bullet point of this agenda item. So for the first part, I think it's more just us talking about how we want to work as a group to accomplish these goals that we've set out. And I guess that, connected with that is how we want to frame our meetings. Do we see our meetings as working meetings where we're looking at maps and trying to work on prioritizing parcels during the meeting? Or if there's some work that we're doing outside of these meetings to bring together, and here we're just discussing what work has been done outside. I don't know what it would be like for us to all kind of go through the mapping as collectively. I could see it being somewhat cumbersome. But just wanted to open it up for discussion on how we think we should go about this process.
I'll start.
Yeah.
My
Oh, go
first
ahead,
thought
Emily.
is that I feel like probably there's a few things that we won't be able to do, like the mapping. We'll have to just choose what we want and find someone who can do it and then bring it back. But it makes sense to me that we'll be working together initially because we haven't generated the specific tasks that a smaller subset of us could work on. But I think over the longer term, it makes sense that there be subsets or individuals who have tasks who can report back. And then we can again look at materials or things that have been generated as a group. That would be my guess.
Yeah. Yep. That sounds great. So as a first step would be some group conversation around honing in on what we want the mapping to look like, what we're prioritizing, how we're going about that. That makes sense. Yeah. Other thoughts, Pat? You want to say something?
I think I agreed with pretty much what Emily was saying, but I can also see a role for doing it both, having meetings where we might be doing some work sometimes and then, meeting as separate groups on it. So I think that's pretty much what Emily is saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Sounds good. Any other thoughts on that process?
May I chime in?
Sure, Patty.
Oh, I don't know how much this is overstepping or what, but I try to figure this out in other meetings with people. I think discussing ideas in meetings is a really great use of time. And communicating reports on some kind of thread can kind of save time in meetings. Is there a kind of like online thread for communicating things, reports, updates?
No, we have, I think we're somewhat limited for actual conversation that can happen that way through the open meeting law. But we can, basically we email participants that just for logistics. But as far as any discussion of moving things along, that needs to happen in a public forum. So I don't know if there's a precedent for some type of public thread but that's not one that I'm aware of for some way that we could do that in a public way. Yeah.
We can have what we do now, we have a place where we're putting various reports and things like that. We can't deliberate. We can't really, go back and forth on ideas and things like that outside of meetings.
Yeah. So since we have some time on this topic, should we dedicate a little time right now just to thinking about how we want to be prioritizing parcels to protect in the city? There's so many things that we can be looking at. It even just in the open space plan, all those that I've collected together in that top priority, there are the criteria that are mentioned are things like environmentally sensitive, using natural heritage and biomap. There's things like adjacency to existing conservation land. There is environmental justice focus. There is recreation, farm, drinking water areas, wildlife habitat, flood storage. There's a lot of different elements that are mentioned just in the OSRP as far as things that we should be working to protect. So I'm curious, how we want to. I think it's easy for us to say we want to include all these various elements to some degree because they're in the plan, and that's what we're working on, is to implement the plan. But how we want to go about prioritizing is another question. Yeah, Emily.
One thing that might be helpful is if we have the information that's already been gathered, like from the municipal vulnerabilities plan or from other reports that help us see what the vulnerabilities are. Because if we're specifically focusing on the climate change vulnerabilities of the city, which I think for me, that would be a high priority, then we could weight those criteria that you mentioned and others that might be helpful to look at based on what the vulnerabilities we perceive to be in the town.
Well, and I guess, that's a good point. I guess I don't know that we're all on the same page about that, is if climate resiliency is the top priority that we want to focus on. Not all of these, many of them are not specific to climate resiliency, although they're connected. Are we in agreement that is the top priority for us for protecting new open space?
We need to know you just listed out a long list. I'm not sure what we don't know, right? So it seems like a no-brainer. Sure, yeah, that sounds good, but I'm curious about what else there is. And I'm sort of flashing back to, this was back in 2018 now, that I used to attend. Emily, I don't know if you know the folks over in Beware. There's the folks who, I don't know if it's the Millers River Watershed Association or something. There's a pretty active group over there, and they had a whole, tool of combining all these different, like biomap and environmental justice, all these different layers, and they had their own special soup mix, but there's a lot of those out there. So I think for us to just say today, yes, that's what we're going to do. I mean, again, it seems right, but I'd also like a little more information.
Well, yeah, I don't think we're deciding officially that. I'm getting like, we just need to move the conversation forward, right? So what would be a helpful next step for us to prioritize in your mind then, Mary?
Well, I think continuing to have, you've made this list, and I'm guessing other people have other ideas of what might be on that list, like, unfragmented forests, or I don't know, I'm not going to come up with any off the top of my head right now. And it might also be interesting to see if there are any particular mapping efforts. I know there's a state mapping effort around climate resilience. The last I looked was a year or two ago, and it was not all that robust, but it may be more robust than it used to be. So I'm just wondering if there's some tools or some help out there already for us to help us. rather than us starting from scratch.
Well, yeah, there absolutely are multiple tools out there, but even within those tools, there's a level of prioritization that needs to occur based on our particular focus areas. Usually, like, you can include different overlap of different elements. I'm not sure. Are there the tools that I've seen? You would select the things that you're prioritizing. There's things like Biomap, of course, that put together a variety of factors, and other tools that do that collectively look at a number of different elements of the landscape, but they don't include, like, that's separate. Biomap doesn't include and doesn't have an environmental justice layer, right? Like there's,
Yeah.
It's separate from that. So we'd have to figure out where that fell for us. Yeah, I don't, Emily, were you about to chime in? No, okay. So I mean, maybe we could look, maybe collecting the variety of tools that, some of the tools that are mentioned specifically. There's the Mass Mapper program that Mass Audubon used to have. I don't believe that's active at the moment.
I think it still is.
Really?
Oh,
Last
you would
time-
know, I guess.
Well, no, last I saw it was down.
Oh.
I don't know if it's been, maybe it's back up. But as far as a tool that's very specific to climate resilience, I'm sure they're out there. I haven't been using them. I don't know if Emily, you've been. Oh,
I haven't used it much, but I did find at least one, like, this might be what Mary was referring to earlier, but that's.
What's that?
There's a Mass Mapper tool about climate vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's under the state, it's not Mass Audubon.
Oh, yeah, the few
Yeah.
different things use Mapper. Mass Audubon used to have a Mapper. I don't think it's
Okay.
active, but there's that map. Yes, there's the Mass GIS Mapper. Yeah.
There's also the FERCog's, I don't know if they've done more recent versions, but they did a Deerfield River watershed wide mapping that would be we'd be glad to take a peek at that and see what's, I don't remember anymore what's in there, but I feel like it was a level of mapping that's worth at least taking a look at.
When we have a follow-up conversation with FERCog, they might also be good folks who can refer us to the tools and the mapping that we're needing, or that would be useful for this.
I also wonder about a practical approach to thinking about our potential funding for land protection as well. I know CPA funds, the CPC plan has specific, I mean, they're pretty broad, but they have specific goals for open space protection. And so if we're looking to use that funding, we should be looking at those priorities. And I mean, I guess I wonder with Franklin Land Trust in Mount Grace or other partners that might be players to hear and learn what their priorities or what they're focused on as well, so that if we want to bring them in, it aligns. What's the story at Franklin these days, Emily, as far as how are you prioritizing projects?
Yeah, we're very open to having conversations with communities. There's areas where we've done work before. There's areas that, rise high in terms of having great farming resources or wildlife habitat. So, and I'm sure it's similar at Mount Grace and Audubon, obviously. But so having that kind of a conversation with us or with the Conservation Commission, I'm sure would be very welcome, and we could compare notes. I guess probably for us, it's a good idea to do exactly what we're doing right now, which is figuring out how to determine what Greenfield's priorities are.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just looking at the open space plan itself and going down the list.
Yeah. So you don't, from Franklin's perspective, you don't have a priority guidelines for conservation projects as far as what's like determining your involvement in them. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a,
we definitely have criteria, project criteria, and then also, goals and to accomplish. So
yeah, that'd be interesting for us to hear about that. Okay, so what do we think? So next step with that,
I'd be willing to put together a little spreadsheet and with some findings of these things that we've already mentioned, what, do like mass map or do whatever the plan is, and then do some columns of what the priorities are for each of those tools. If that's, if it pans out that that's a good way to do it, but I'd be willing to make a first stab at it.
that'd be awesome. Yeah, thanks, Mary. That's great. I wonder. Yeah, I think that's great. And then we can. I'm just wondering about our process for honing in on I guess we're just gonna go with what we all think for a while, but we have to get some city input on the priorities at some point as well. So maybe we would start by getting a proposal for what we are suggesting that we could then present as priorities to the city.
And I think just referring back to recent, plans that the city's done, whether it's, that the recently updated sustainable Greenfield or the 2021 open space plan. I'm sure there's others. I could also pull up the priorities that are listed in the MVP, anything else like that, that the city has already said this is what we want to prioritize, because that would at least be a starting point.
Yeah, I guess from what I see in the OSRP, it has all of these things. And that's sort of what I'm, like, where do we, like, it includes all of those things that I listed out at the beginning. Those are all action items in the OSRP, that are focused on forest fragmentation and ag land and this and that. And like all these, each action step has a different focus. So it feels like somehow we need to prioritize within that large scope of possibilities.
My question is, are we gonna be looking at maps that show open space, and then within these open space parcels, are we gonna know what they can address? Like, do we know, okay, yeah, I'm imagining we can figure out if they're environmental justice or not, because there are maps of that, somebody can superimpose, I can't. But all these things that you mentioned, do we know that what they possibly can address?
I think with most of them, yes. So things like natural heritage, there's map layers for that.
Yeah.
Biomap covers a lot of the conservation related elements of what's on the land. Some of them are distance proximity to existing. So that's just a matter of us looking at proximity to existing protected land or open space. So I think a lot of them, yes, but there is I think the climate resilience elements, and that's what we're saying, this analysis of impervious surfaces and drainage and whatnot. I think that might be something we don't have is a good sense of what parcels need to be protected to have the biggest impact on climate resilience, stormwater in particular, or I don't know, maybe there's a tool out there that can help us with that has some layers.
There is actually some analysis that would be funded by the grant that FERCog applied for, working with us and with Field Geology. would at least be addressing some of that. But that's, that's a little bit more in depth than just looking at biomap or, BEMA or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Awesome.
Can I add that migration corridors, be definitely considered. And there's a for like natural communities to shift and the wildlife in them. The Nature Conservancy apparently has a mapping tool that will show migration. And I just
Great. Yeah.
Fire shows like an in-depth explanation of any kind of natural community anywhere, which I think is super helpful for getting an idea of what the communities are.
What was the last one? I think I jumped in and I didn't hear it.
It's called Land Fire.
Land fire. I
Yeah,
don't know land fire.
It's like kind of a game changer for like what I like to know what the native plants would be in a community and what their disturbance regimes might be or could be and how those might be shifting in the future. It's pretty cool.
Oh, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for mentioning migration and corridors. That is in the OSRP as well. There's many elements that are in there as well. Migration corridors as well as connectivity in watersheds. So
Another element to consider is readiness. Willing partners,
Right.
availability of it to be conserved. It's a practical thing, but it's another
it's an
important element.
Right. Yeah. For anybody that has been involved, that's like the key element in land protection is a willing seller. That's a great
But
point.
when you say that, Emily, I mean, how is that possibly mapped?
That's not necessarily mapped, but that's a good thing to come to from conversations with people who are already working on that. So like talking to a land trust who has relationships with landowners. That's a good way to get a better sense of that. And then, what's on the market, what other characteristics of it make it likely to be purchased or purchasable? Was it just bought last year by a family, or has it been on the market for 5 years, by somebody?
Right. Yeah.
I also wonder, even if it can't be purchased, that informing, like if kind of like in a river corridor, sort of like overlay, like, or zoning of some sort, that like homeowners or landowners be kind of guided or enabled to know how they can best like protect that land, even if they are the ones who are owning it and managing it, like kind of best practices for that particular use would be helpful. I feel like there's one more thing I was going to add, but I forgot.
Great. So Mary, you're gonna assemble a spreadsheet of some tools. That's
Well,
sort
I
of
don't know, this list, I'm typing away here. This list is getting longer and longer, but yes, I will make a first stab.
first stab at some tools. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And maybe someone can just give some thought to between now and our next meeting is how we want to go about that. So in the time we have left in this topic, we had said we'd look at a couple specific projects. It is, I do think it's worthwhile, particularly since it's going to take us some time to get a prioritized map together. And if there are projects that come up, I think it's worthwhile. It's also more exciting for us to look at actual things than talk about planning for the whole time. So thanks, Mary, for suggesting that. And we can look at these couple of projects that you suggested.
I think it's probably more relevant to look at the Shelburne Road one.
Okay,
Because in all fairness, the other one is really more of a pet project of mine, and I feel like it's not really fair for me to, yeah, that's not the one we want to look at. But the Shelburne Road one,
oh, not this one,
right?
Shelburne Road, sorry.
Because that already meets more of the criteria that we've talked about. So, I mean, it's been a while since I put this together. I just felt like I'm the person who wants to do something. So,
Yeah,
and so I won't, since Joan is sharing, I won't be able to show with my cursor, but if you follow from the rotary that's over on the right-hand side of the screen there, and you go up Route 2, and actually to access Shelburne Road, you have to go kind of behind Big Y, I think it is.
yeah.
Which is, I'm pointing to it, but you can't see where it is.
Right,
And
yeah,
Shelburne Road is, if you haven't been on it, is absolutely beautiful. It follows the Wheeler Brook little watershed, or and it's a road that has unfortunately in some ways been maintained, because it really should not, we shouldn't, in my opinion, just my opinion as just a private citizen, the Wheeler Brook will always win in terms of eroding all of the roads, all of the culverts, all of the stopgap measures. But anyway, it's just absolutely beautiful. And right now it's closed or semi-closed. People are still driving through that, but the city says it's closed because there are just so many dangerous erosions happening right at the moment. But you can see in the bright green that there are some areas that have already been preserved. Well, the one that Joan is pointing at right now is a 63-acre parcel that is under permanent protection. And then just to the right of that, or to the east of that, the city of Greenfield also owns 48 acres, which are not currently protected. And I wonder about that because while some of it may be that the city would want to keep some of the frontage onto as, commercial land. I'm guessing it might be zone commercial through there. It seems like there could be an opportunity for us to try to protect the back part of that parcel at any rate. So
yeah,
that's of interest to me. And then up above the other green parcels, which I should have made a different color because they're not protected. But my understanding is that there's been conversations between the Conservation Commission and 2 different property owners who are interested in donating parcels to the city. And when I inquired before Niche Vi, I think is his name, left, he said one was more active than the other. So I don't know, Emily, if you have any update on that or if you know anything about that.
We have discussed it, but I don't know what the current activity is.
Okay. Last Mitch said there was going to be the Conservation Commission would be walking the site at some point. And I believe that's the one that actually has a little bit of frontage. It's the southernmost of the 3 parcels. But you can see there's a lot of land. You can't see that it's steeply sloped and the frontage is questionable. I mean, to get, I really question how you'd be able to access the land from Shelburne Road. So I just feel like there's opportunities in this area to explore what the ownership is and what, potential willingness there might be for protecting this area. And just one other thing that I would say is I have not started any conversation, but I'm very curious about, I understand that the city sees this as an evacuation route, but there's also South Shelburne Road, which leads out of the city that doesn't entail being on Route 2 or 91. And I'm wondering if there's any possibility of starting the process of discontinuing this road. There is one residence on the west end, right almost up to where the Shelburne, right where your cursor is now. There's
right there.
It could be there. Yeah, it is there. So that, if that was if the road was discontinued, then there would have to be some agreement with the town of Shelburne for them to plow up to that property. So that, there's tons of logistics, most of which I know nothing about, but as my partner and I have been walking Shelburne Road frequently through the summer and just enjoying how utterly beautiful it is and how utterly futile trying to keep that road maintained is. I just have been dreaming about protecting this land, and I haven't overlaid any of the, you know, natural heritage or anything like that, but I could do that as a next step to just see, you know, if there's any endangered species or anything else mapped in there that we would want to know.
Emily, has
May
this
I-
part? Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to, this is Elizabeth. I just wanted to say thank you, Mary. I am sitting south of where you all are looking at and talking about. And I know Shelburne Road, and I'm learning a lot, and I never realized all of this. This is why I came to this meeting. So thank you all, and thank you, Mary, for this. Because I'm right around the corner, just down that big S curve, boom. And that's great that you guys are doing this. So very nice map.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Emily, has the Conservation Commission discussed this parcel at all?
Not recently, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
But I think one of our goals is for us all to get more familiar with all the parcels. Well, if it's not protected and it's owned by the city of Greenfield, it probably isn't held by the Conservation Commission.
Right.
So I'd be curious what entity has, you know, stewardship of it, and also what the purposes of it are. There's so many different things that land could be used for. And it would, I think you're right, Mary, that thinking about the frontage probably having some other purpose would make sense, and then looking at the back acres. It's really interesting, just to jump into talking about this topic in general, to think about examining retiring the road to see if that's a possibility, what the gains or losses would be. Other things that I would want to look at would be to do some analysis of the Wheeler Brook, to see if there are floodplains which are currently disconnected, which could potentially be reconnected. Restoration projects like that are pretty pricey and time consuming, but really valuable. And not necessarily that would change whether it's going to continue to have conflicts for the roads, because that's such a very common thing. So many roads are built right next to the rivers, and you know they used to be navigatable, you know, like avenues for commerce. So I would love to, you know, if this is something that we're taking on, see if we can work with Brookog or, you know, some other contractor to do some river analysis to see what the current conflict points are and what the potential ameliorations could be above and beyond protection, or, you know, of the areas.
Yeah.
So a couple of other observations I can make about the map. One is that there is a farm at the top of the hill. There's some private land, and there is a dammed area and a pond up at the top. And then something that I observed at the bottom where the, is it Seventh Day Adventist, that church with all the solar on the
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witness, yeah.
There's a lot of that poor little Wheeler Brook runs right through their property there, and it just floods all over the place because, yeah, I'm sure that was probably a floodplain at some point. So that's a really good point about, you know, the flood storage. I mean, where it's coming down Shelburne Road, I don't know what the grade is, but I can tell you when we walk a mile up to the Shelburne line, and it is significantly steep, and there's maybe some floodplain storage areas up above, but not a lot. It's pretty, the ravine becomes quite constricted. It's basically road, brook, and then ravine. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we should have that on our DPW list too. Whenever I think we need to meet with Marlo at some point
Okay.
to talk about a few things. We'll have that one on our list for that. Great. Thanks, Mary, for bringing that up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I say? if there is a meeting with Morrow, I would like to be included in that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
I have other questions for him.
Okay. Great. Sounds good. Okay, so, and I would guess I would say, I would invite, folks to bring projects like this to us, right? Just for us to be starting to look at projects and to keep us all excited and engaged. So if any other things come along that you're noticing, so like a parcel for sale, something of note that we just want to have a look at and start to talk about, that'd be great. Okay, we'll move on to announcements, and then we'll have a chance for public comment, which I know Elizabeth was interested in. So any announcements? Yeah, Francois.
I did check with the Connecticut River Conservancy to see if they were doing any projects on land conservation or if they had done any mapping, and the answer was no on both.
Okay, great. Thanks for asking. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Mary.
I have an announcement that the Greenfield Tree Committee is hosting a community tree planting on Saturday, October 19th at 9 a.m. Starts on James Street in Greenfield, and there's more information. I can share information, and if you're on Facebook, you can see the event there. But we'll be there from 9 to probably around 10:30, planting about 15 or so trees.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other announcements? All right, we'll open up to public comment. Elizabeth. You're on mute there, Elizabeth. There you go.
This has been a really interesting meeting. We have had discussions at the Agricultural Commission regarding the amount of land that is going to real estate development people, including my own neighborhood here. I'm off of South Shelburne Road, so I'm right where Mary was discussing the conservation. And I'm not sure if Batinsky Farm on, is it Coleraine Road? Yes, Coleraine. Batinsky Farm, I'm not sure. I spoke with that woman this summer, and she said, I don't know, the family's not interested in, taking over the farm. So I guess we're looking at, if the more we can conserve land, let's face it, as we get older, we can't keep up with what we used to do. And sometimes one has to move into back into their house, and what do they do with their land? I don't know. That's why I'm interested in the conversation I heard tonight, because I don't know how much land they've got, but I know it's agricultural. And I'd hate to see it. In my opinion, I would like to have it preserved and protected and used as agricultural or recreational or something like that. Because we don't, we're becoming urban. I don't call Greenfield a town anymore. I now call it a city, because I can see what's happening bit by bit. So thank you so much for all the work you do. And I'll report back to my commission and let them know that we've got folks out here really working on it and being aware of it. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah.
As I okay.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, so we're working on implementing this open space and recreation plan and other plans that the city have connected open space, and conserving ag land is listed multiple times in multiple plans. So it's something that's definitely on our radar, and I think happy to work together to help to do that.
Yeah, because Francois, when she came to our meeting, and I was pointing out agricultural, it was in so many pieces of that plan that you had put together. So, you know, we're all working toward it in our own way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for coming tonight. And I would say as you're having conversations with landowners too, and if you're ever talking about projects that maybe you need some assistance with, you can come and talk with us and maybe we can help in some way.
Yeah. I'm a little concerned. I'm concerned about Batinsky's. I really want to see that preserved for recreational, for agricultural use, you know, especially given the Massachusetts law and the city ordinance. There's many people in this town who are interested in having agricultural animals. And right now it's pretty tough because of the ordinance. That's okay. We have a permitting process that we can go through. But you know, this is where the land is going. It's going and it's getting built up. And that's what I'm seeing. And I've only been here for 5 years. And it happened in my neighborhood. Yeah. So I appreciate everything that everyone's doing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other, Patty, did you have something you want to chime in with?
I wonder if solar farms is allowed on agricultural land right now. Do you know?
Which farm?
If what's,
Solar.
say it again?
Solar,
Oh, solar.
Sorry, it's maybe too loud.
it was solar.
If solar farms are allowed on agricultural or rural residential areas. Where I live around Glenbrook, I think I heard that somebody was considering a solar farm near me. And I just don't know that would be a great use of agricultural land.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what do you know, Mary, you about to say?
I don't know. I think there's a solar overlay district, but I'm not positive. You'd have to check the zoning regs.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's multiple use or dual use ag solar, which is a different concept, but you know, is controversial, but also if it's used, then it does allow for pasture or some type of agricultural use beneath the solar.
Right.
I'll just chime in and offer another perspective, which there is some studies also showing that's not actually the case, and that the productivity of that land is not necessarily, it's diminished with the solar installation. And then there's questions about what happens to that land long term with once the infrastructure is there. So I think I'd like to see us, if we're gonna, you know, approach this at all, to do it to do some research to see what's what on that one.
And I know Kent, who was at our last meeting, this was his topic of interest. So if he continues to be involved, he may have some input on that. And I know that Mass Audubon and Harvard Forest put out this report last year that analyzing the solar production needs for the state, and determined that our needs can be met by using existing disturbed areas, rooftops, and parking lots, et cetera. So that's what we've been advocating for, is not using any other open space for new solar farms, keeping it all on already disturbed land.
What's the name of that study?
Growing solar, protecting nature.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Any other last public comment? All right. Thank you everyone for attending. Our next meeting is November 14th. We're still on our second Thursday schedule now for this year. 4:45 PM. And I guess I should just ask, is this working well? We sort of threw it out there this summer as a potential and we've been attending, so it seems to be working so far. Everyone feels good with this. Great.
I don't think I'll be able to make that one. I'll still be in France and it's gonna be pretty close to 11 p.m.
Yeah, that's okay.
Unless I'm having an insomnia, I'll miss it.
Yeah, okay. So I guess just since we are a small group for quorum, just let me know if anybody else thinks that you're not going to be able to make that meeting and we can postpone or postpone if we need to. All right, do we have a motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.